And it's Gordo here from Gordo's Games, and we're back for some Digimon TCG content today. Today it's a little bit different. We are looking to do a tier list. Now, I haven't done one of these on the channel at all before, so bear with me. If there's any way you think I can improve this going forward, any way I can explain things better for you going forward, by all means just let me know. And obviously this tier list is based purely on my overall idea of how the set's looking to play out. I could be completely wrong, I could be completely right, you know, but we'll find out as we go along. So let's head over to it here. And if you do like this content, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications so you know when this content goes live for you. Without further ado, let's look at the tier list. So we are going off 4 tiers here. So tier 1 being basically your most competitive decks, the one you'll see time and time again in events, most likely to top events or win events, purely based on the fact they're good decks as well as they're highly represented. Simple as. 1.5, they're the ones you'll see maybe a little bit less of, but they are still competitive decks, have potentially just as much chance as tier 1, but due to the lower representation and maybe not being as high in functionality as the other ones, just comes in a little bit short. Tier 2, they're just decks that are played within the sets, that because there are those that are people that are loyal to the decks and they just kind of stick with them. Haven't really seen much of a buff, or may have seen 1 or 2 cards, but it hasn't really impacted the deck enough to do what it needs to do. So we're tier 2, and then you got your Rogue. Now Rogue doesn't mean it's a bad deck, doesn't mean it's a great deck. It is literally just those that are they don't really fall within the meta, but they can anti-meta to some point. I say Rogue, I might as well just call this anti-meta, but we're going to go with Rogue. So we're going to start off this list here. So with the current meta, we're moving away from OTK to more of a wide board state. Blockers may see a bit more of a position within the meta because of things like cross hearts and that, and just small bodies chipping away at you, because chip damage becomes more of a thing rather than the one punch kill basically. So our first one here is Ancient Grey. Now with Ancient Grey, it's still overall a very strong deck. Its play mechanic hasn't really changed. It does what it's supposed to do, but I don't feel it takes a tier 1 spot. I think it will take, realistically, it will take a 1.5. The reason being for that is the pace of some of the decks this set, the chip damage, isn't necessarily what lets Ancient Grey set up like it would do, because I don't think it falls into that tier 1 meta. It does take in things like Crimson Blaze, which may come up for quite a lot going into this set. I have found that in testing to be a very prominent card overall. But yeah, so 1.5 for Ancient Grey. Moving on to next, we've got Alphamon. Now this is based on currently where we stand without the ban list, because I'm not aware of the announcement for when it actually comes into effect. So I'm going to treat it as if it's not coming into effect for BT10 basically, although it most likely will. If it does, we can come back to that. But at this current time, tier 1. It's overall a very consistent deck. It's got a lot of utility. Things like Cool Boy that allow it to hit anything can basically add it outside of options. The utility of having blockers, so for next set it has the blockers in hand to be able to do what it needs to do. It has pops, it has memory gain. It's like the aggressive, it's just an aggressive loop version really. So you want Lilith looping that does all the memory gain, but this one does it via attacks and end of attacks. So it's overall just a very strong deck. A lot of mechanics in there. Yeah, it's a pain to deal with when you have to play against, I know that much. Bloom Lord. Oh, I am so 50-50 with this deck. I can see it being at tier 1.5, but there's quite a few things that counter it, to the point of Crimson Blaze absolutely ruins it. You know, just yeah, Crimson Blaze absolutely ruins it. And I think it just pops small bodies because they cycle out very low DP things. Like for instance, BT10 Metal Grey, DD Evolving, you can pop their level 4 because most of their level 4s are a 3k body, which is not the kind of threshold you want to be at. So either force a Bloom Lord to do it in raising, or they just have to risk it basically. but in some tokens it can be just as aggressive as other things in the meta. At this point here, I'm going to leave it as 1.5. I might come back to that depending on how filled up we get on this line here. I might just put everything 1.5. Dark Knight ex ante. Now, along with cross arts, you know, we've got all these new things where we're using save as a function within the game, using tamers to obviously hide source underneath and obviously play things out. All very unique mechanics. I believe one of the things that we were missing for the Dark Knight ex ante would have been the security Digimon, but we didn't get told, or they did not be released alongside this set, so we will miss out on that in line with the actual deck itself. I don't think it's going to be tier 1, but I do think it will catch people off, because you do have the tamer, which gives all, you know, basically gives that blocker to quite a bit of the deck, which can slow down the chip damage of things like cross hearts. It also has the unplay, it also has the Dark Knight ex ante, which allows you to pop a tamer. Has a lot of functionality with it. You have the old BT10, I want to say, Dark Knight, which is on deletion, play out 2 things from underneath it. So there's just a lot of functionality and a lot of board swarm to go with it when it needed. So I do think this one will be 1.5. I don't see movement to tier 1. I can't say for certain the impact of not having that security Digimon as of yet. I could be proven wrong, this could go down to tier 2. I'd like to say it doesn't, because personally I do really like the deck. Imperial Demo. I mean, what do you say about Imperial Demo except for it's Imperial Demo? It does Imperial Demo things. It's very quick, it's very aggressive, chip damage is back. But there are still blockers, but it all depends on the level of blockers that are used, for instance. I don't think it's tier 1. I do think it's tier 1.5. Probably more towards the front of 1.5. Just purely because when it's a very consistent deck overall still. Regardless, obviously it didn't fall out of grace in the last set. It just wasn't played as highly because of, as sets develop, people move on to the newer decks that are around. But it still had a strong game plan. Yeah, it was just a very overall strong deck. Still is. Now, anybody that knows what I play knows where I want to put this. Like literally, I want it to sit up here, and that's where I like it to stay. But the same token, I like it down here in Rogue. Now, throughout last set, at the start of BT9, I consider this deck to be a Rogue pick. Towards the end of it, I do think it went up to being a tier 1 because of the factors of how much representation went into the deck and how well it was doing to a lot of matchups. The red base Gaimon was just very aggressive, very controlling. It's just an all-around great deck. Good matchups for this deck. So Cross Hearts, if you build it right, it's not free, depending on how your playstyle is, but it very well should be. You should be looking to take that deck out pretty easily. Just pick off the 4 Mikeys and then just go about your day, because they have no way of recycling them out, but they can still play the Shatman stuff out. So don't get caught in that trap where you think there's no Mikeys you can slow down. If you're taking that Mikeys, just keep going for game. Just don't slow down, basically. So whereas I want to put this to tier 1 because of how much it counters Cross Hearts, I do feel like it will be 1.5. I'm not sure on its matchups into things like Blue Flare at this point. I don't go very wide, so I don't think that's overall a bad matchup, and I do get to play the Tamers again. So things like Cross Hearts, Blue Flare, Dark Knight ex ante may well be good matchups for this deck, in a sense. Does still struggle with things like Grandis, unless you run the top end of the Omni ex ante to slow them down. The Reaper, that's pretty safe. Yeah, there's a few odd ones that are in there. Like Melga, for instance, isn't bad because you can detach to stop being bounced if you run the red stuff in there, because you'll see a lot of people do move over to the black base Gaimon for the facility of things like Deltamon into Megadramons for a 2 cost and things like that. So I think it will sit about 1.5. As I said, I'd like to move it up, but I can't just stack the odds, can I? Grandis. Grandis is just a high roll deck. I think realistically, if you see the pieces for this deck and you get lucky in security, there just isn't anything much you can do to it. I think you'll still see people playing into it next set as well, so I do think it's going to be highly represented to a point. Not as much as Cross Hearts and things like that will be, but you know, actually, you know what? Let's get to that point there. Where is it? That's just tier 1. Purely on the basis that people will play it. It's very cheap to make. I mean, you don't necessarily have to run the SEC, but you can. And it's just a very cheap deck. It's like playing D Reaper when it first came out. It's pennies to make it. So I think this takes the top spot just purely on how much I think it's going to be played into. But what may actually change as the set goes on, it may not fall out of grace, should I say, but it may fall off because people will start trying to play the counters to it. So, you know, things like the Diamond are going to be the ones to take in a Mega Dramon. Who knows, Machine Dramon could be in there. There's a variety of things that could possibly come up there. So we'll move that there. Grandis, I put that, it is a high roll deck. It probably is more toward tier 1.5 to be honest. But you know, I could be wrong there. It depends on how much things like Mastimon and Security Control pick back up again, because that for Grandis isn't fun. We're moving on to Jasmine. Now, Jasmine, I feel is going to be a tier 1 deck. I think it's a very strong deck. It's got a very good selection of mechanics to the deck. You know, the system ones doing all the pieces, blockers, buffs to your Digimon on your opponent's turn. You know, things like being able to Digivolve for free up into another level by, I think it's the CL. Things like that. Having the Blanc to play, ditch 1 to draw 2. You know, there's just a lot of utility in that deck, a lot of versatility, and there's some strong searches within it. So I think it will be tier 1. I think it's going to see a high play as well. Really because it is a favourable card. It's Jasmine, it's a Royal Knight, so I think this will see some play overall. So I'm putting this at tier 1. Really the lower end of tier 1, because I do think there's all more consistent decks, but I do think it is about as consistent as Grandis. It doesn't OTK as quick as Grandis, I'll say that much, but it can be deadly. We have Mastimon. Mastimon last set kind of fell out of grace. It's not that it was a bad deck, it's just it couldn't really keep pace with everything just going ham into security. But I do feel like this set it does come back up. And like I said, I might shift this around a little bit later. It does come back up into the 1.5 because of the fact of how much people go wide. So things like and you know how much potential tamer hate might be a good thing. So Lucimon being a useful card in there, being able to take out the tamer, then the mass day effect to take out the body on board, things like that. Death Xmon being a facility to when you just want to throw something down. I just think there's a lot of things that potentially help this deck along. Minus checks on security, things like even things like Holy Flame if you really wanted to take it in there in certain matchups. If that goes off in security, great times. But yeah, I think Mastimon has a bit more playability this set. I mean, it's always been a strong deck. It was just a case of its pace was slacking slightly in the last meta. Everything was a little bit too quick, whereas it's like to get somewhat set up. Melga I will put up here just alongside Grandis, just probably ahead of Grandis to be honest, because Melga can do well going into. No, we're actually gonna put Melga up here. Actually, we'll put it ahead of Jasmine because the consistentness deck can be pretty dumb. What to say about Minerva? It's a deck that you can draw half of your deck and do enough swings in one turn. It literally is the pinnacle of an OTK with one stack really. If you manage to get things right. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how well OTK decks are going to transfer into next set with all the chip damage happening, but this deck does have the facility to bounce things back to hand, which actually does get around the deletion or the save effects that want to go off with the Digicross stuff. So obviously they can still use those things from hands, but it's not always the worst thing to just get them off the board out of the way. Is that massively useful? Who knows yet. But you can get yourself to level 6 pretty quickly. You can get a blocker, you can bounce multiple things, and you can do 5-6 checks if you've got the correct setup. So still a very strong deck. Great draw power, great utility. It's just the only thing the deck doesn't have is outright removal, but that didn't stop it last set from doing well. Blue Flare, probably one of the decks I have looked into the very least. Ironically, when I like grey ones and black or grey ones and things like this, but it's a blue version of a grey one. It's basically the new blue hybrids, and that, as far as my understanding is, it loves a wide board. The more bodies you have, the more it basically looks to stun stuff, even if you have sources. So it's not all about the source strip, it's about how wide your board goes. So it's almost forcing you to back into an OTK meta somewhat. I would say it goes up in here in tier 1.5. Do think it falls behind Mastimon here, because I think Gaimon has a good matchup into it purely because of the Tamer hate, and I think Mastimon can as well, because big security hits from Mastimon, Chaos Degradation, things like that. Obviously one of the few cards that actually get out of the whole on deletion, put this under your Tamer and stuff like that. Minerva. So we're going to put Minerva up here in tier 1 alongside the other version of Loop. Minerva's looking to be very strong. I mean, Lilith Loop did very well on its day. All the variations of Loop did very well, to the point of they had to get rid of things like Mega Digimon Fusion. But this card and Revive from Darkness, it's just looking to be insane. Obviously there are things that will look to counter that, so I feel like everyone's going to be taking in Crimson Blazes for things like Minerva, Jasmine, Bloom Lord, Cross Hearts, anything that potentially uses like even Imperial Demo. You know, it doesn't hit the Pile Demo, but you can still hit Vmon and Singmon. So I feel like Crimson Blaze is going to pop up a lot because of decks like these. But overall, it can look to go off in a very mad way. I mean, I'm a massive fan of the Cerberus package, so I could be completely biased, but I do think it's going to be looked to do good next set. And because it's a variant of Loop back, I think it's going to see a lot of playability and a lot of representation going into the future sets. Ophania, I think goes to tier 2 this set. I think the chip damage alone looks to slow down, looks to play against the deck, because it used to be a case just raised out, recovers like 3 times and pass over turn, maybe pop smut. But I just think the constant chip, saving life from things like Cross Hearts, or even things like Blue Flare, Dark Knight, how any of those kind of decks can really hinder the deck or lift your play into it. And then you rely on your security being overall good to save your bacon. And then you still in the meta, you're still going to have things like Melga for OTKs, Grandis for OTKs, Gaimon here for some form of OTK / the control side of things. I think Jasmine and that. I think there's just a few picks that I think would do overall a little better than Ophania here. So yeah, I'm going with tier 2. Like I said, that's just my opinion on it. I'm probably going to get some hate mail in the comments, but you know what, I'm willing to accept it. Ragnar. Oh no, back in the day of Ragnar, I was a massive fan. I picked up my alts. You know, I sat there with my nice Ragnar alts, which ironically, a lot of people do say that it's better than the new Ragnar's out, because of the fact of how hard it was. Not how hard, how much setup is required to get 2 stacks to do what you need to do. But if it goes off, it goes off. I don't think it's Rogue. I can't say tier 1 either. I'd love to. I'd love to, because I'm going to personally play the deck myself, and I feel like I'll enjoy playing it and losing with it. I do think it could be 1.5, but I think sheerly based on the pace of the meta, I think it's going to end up being a tier 2. Big sad, big sad. I mean, that is not what I want to see in the slightest, but I do think it will fall there because of its pace. Yeah, I mean, it's got a very interesting mechanics to it. It's got the prevention deletion. It's got potential, not board whites, but big stack deletion with the Ragnar effect, as well as burning security, and it's got blitz, all that kind of stuff. If you can get the ideal stack off, it's like playing Crimson mode at the very top end. If they have two bodies, you're able to get rid of enough sources to get the deletion on both and trash 2 and then swing the blitz for the game. But it's just, there's a lot of setup involved there. Okay. Bagra. I don't know if it's not Rogue. I mean, honestly, I'd make a new category for Bagra and just put it there. I don't think it's got that much going for it next set. I think it gets support going to future sets, but I don't think it's in a position next set where it's considered to be competitive in this format. I'd like to be proven wrong. I could well be wrong. People could just crack the code. It could just be the way, and Bagra could be the new thing. But I just don't feel it's got it. Wargrey X Anti. So keeping in theme with the OTK decks that have come across from last set, so we've got things like Alpha, Melga, Grandis, Gaio. We have Wargrey X. With Wargrey, with the Grey monster having the protection clause in it, does allow it to survive some things from the likes of the security control on that. Where there are massive deletion cards and things like that, and with the Metal Grey X Anti able to buff you over that 15k threshold, so Wyvern Breath doesn't outright destroy you. Obviously Chaos Degradation still being a thing, but that's why it does have things like Delicate Plan, Wargrey. I do think this deck it will look to do okay next set. I do think it will fall in 1.5. Possibly around this margin here. I'm gonna go about here. I think it's still gonna struggle. I mean, it's got the ADP. If you focus the plays of ADP, yeah, you can actually. If you go ADP and just ignore going to Wargrey X, you're in a good position really, and just keep rebuilding those stacks. Gaiamon's matchup into Wargrey X, I think Gaiamon wins that from my testing. Being able to take the resource against Wargrey X is just brutal. Taking their tamers, cool boys, ties. They lose the momentum quite badly. Going into the next part, we've got security control. I think it'll be up to 1.5. I think it will go into a position where it's pretty good overall within the meta. I have no idea where I'd put this. I'm going to put it alongside Mastimon here, probably a bit further because it might be more consistent. Who knows? It's just security control. It has a lot of hefty bombs and security, and it can perform quite well. It's taken big events. I'm pretty sure it did well in a recent event that came about. So we're going there. D Brigade, once again 1.5 again. I think it's just in there. It's just there. Chip damage. It's got a good solid win con. It can play into security control options as well. So I'm going to put it in mid 1.5. Yellowstar. I'm just going to stick Yellowstar and Rogue because Yellowstar is just. It was in there from the last set because of the fact it was supposed to be the deck that countered the meta, and it did to an extent, but I don't think it saw enough representation, or to the fact that I don't think it countered it as much as I thought it would. So I want to go with Rogue here because it still can do things. It's just whether that deck is considered and how much it can deal with chip, because it all relies basically on that security doing what it needs to do. D Reaper has a very clear game plan. We're going to put it up. D Reaper just up near here. it can do some crazy things. You know, it gets to the point where you can play down Death X Mon, so nothing if you play into certain matchups because they've got so many things on board. You've got the Gatekeeper for recovery, you can stop their attacks, get with minus checks if you've got 6 sources. Just there's a lot of utility to it, and obviously cheap cards play up searchers. So I'm going to put it 1.5. Jasmine, sadly, I think will be a tier 2. Just a bit better than Bagra. Maybe better than Ephania because I like Jasmine. Once again, this makes me sad here, right? These are 2 decks that I want to play. Don't think the new arm just gives it enough. I think maybe when you get the next one along, XL arm, I think it is. Blitz one. We got Blitz one, we got Crit arm, Blitz arm, XL arm. Once we get the next one, we might see a bit more from it because we might get additional support to go with it. But generally, I think it's around the tier 2 marker. Maid mode with Venusmon, basic, I guess, into the form of security control. Yeah, it's looking to be a strong deck. Venusmon alone is nuts to deal with overall, so I feel like it's going to cause a bit of an indifference in the meta. I'd an intrigue to see what people do because I haven't played against it myself as of yet. But as soon as you gain additional security checks and things like that, and just shutting off any of those things can be absolutely crucial in some matchups. And trying to, it inherently just slows down your opponent. And obviously you've got the old security you want to stop you from gaining security checks when you raise out. So you raise out, you get -3 in checks. You've got the Venusmon for the other side of it, and you've got all this plug-in stuff from the maid mode and that as well. So I generally feel like it's going to do well in that set. Overall, that's my anticipation within the meta. Like I said, this is only based on what I've looked into. I could be completely off. I would love to hear what you think in the comment section. And who knows, maybe we'll look to do one of these midway through the set into BT10. This is just based on early looks and testing. But like I said, if you do like the content, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications so you know when this content goes live for you. And keep giving me your feedback here. The more I know which content you're looking for is the more I can look to put out for you all. Thanks for tuning in to Gordo's Games. I'll catch you all later.